Hello, and welcome to Screaming in the Cloud, with your host, Chief Cloud Economist at the Duckbill Group, Corey Quinn. This weekly show features conversations with people doing interesting work in the world of cloud, thoughtful commentary on the state of the technical world, and ridiculous titles for which Corey refuses to apologize. This is Screaming in the Cloud.
Who loves managing identity-based access to AWS resources across multiple accounts? Absolutely no one, that's right, which is why our IAM policies are so full of stars, we need a telescope to make sense of them. It's time-consuming and complex, but you've got to get a handle on it to control costs and, more importantly, ensure security and compliance. Teleport makes managing access to AWS resources like EC2, RDS, EKS, and many more inscrutably named things dead simple. First, with Teleport, you can separate out who can provision AWS resources from who can access them to control costs. That's right, creating a thing and accessing a thing are different things. Tell everyone, especially the CloudFormation team, please. Next, Teleport provides fine-grained, identity-based access and audit for all your engineers to their AWS resources. You can easily implement least privilege with just-in-time access requests, and all sessions are recorded for compliance and training purposes. Secure and easy to use. Exactly what developers need to stay productive on AWS. To learn more, smash the link below, along with the like and subscribe buttons while you're mucking around down there.
Developers need significantly more time to become productive on AWS, and the only way to fix that is to apply for an SVP role at AWS. Void where prohibited. Please give Seattle our best.
Welcome to Screaming in the Cloud. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn, and my guest today is Maciej Winnicki, who is the founder of Cloudash. Now, before I dive into the intricacies of what that is, I'm going to just stake out a position that one of the biggest painful parts of working with AWS in any meaningful sense, particularly in a serverless microservices way, is figuring out what the hell's going on in the environment. There's a bunch of tools that offer to do this, and they aspire to mediocrity. Maciej, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So I turned out to have accidentally blown up Cloudash sort of before you were really ready for the attention. You, I think, tweeted about it or put it on Hacker News or something. I stumbled over it because it turns out that anything that vaguely touches cloud winds up in my filters because of awesome technology and personality defects on my part. And I tweeted about it as I set it up and got the thing running. And apparently this led to a surge of attention on this thing that you've built. So let me start off with an apology. Oops, I didn't realize it was supposed to be a quiet launch.
Actually, thank you for that. Like that was great, and we get a lot of attention from your tweet thread actually, because at the end that was the most critical part. At the end of the tweet thread, you wrote that you're staying as a customer, so we have it on our website, and this is perfect. But actually, as you said, that's correct. Our marketing strategy for releasing Cloudash was to post it on LinkedIn. I know this is not kind of the best strategy, but that was our plan. Like it was like, hey, like me and my friend Thomas, who's also working on Cloudash, we thought like, let's just post it on LinkedIn and we'll see how it goes. And accidentally, I'm receiving a notification from Twitter. Hey, Corey started tweeting about it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. But then I read the,
oops,
yeah. Then I read the kind of conclusion, and I was super happy. And again, thank you for that, because this is actually when Cloudash kind of started rolling as a product and as a kind of business. So yeah, that was great.
So to give a little backstory and context here is I write a whole bunch of serverless nonsense. I build APIs, gateway, I hook them up to Lambda's function, and then it sort of kind of works-ish. From there, I would try and track down what was going on, because in a microservices land, everything becomes a murder mystery. We're trying to figure out what's broken, and things have exploded. And I became a paying customer of IOPipe, and then New Relic bought them. Well, crap. Then I became a paying customer of Epsagon, and they got acquired by Cisco, at which point I immediately congratulated the founders, who I know on a social basis, and then closed my account because I wanted to get out before Cisco ruins it, because Cisco. Then it was, what am I going to use next? And right around that time is when I stumbled across Cloudash. And it takes a different approach than any other entity in the space that I've seen, because you are a native Mac desktop app. I believe you're Mac only, but you seem to be Electron, so I could be way off base on that.
So we're Linux as well right now, and soon we'll be Windows as well. But yeah, so right now it's Mac OS and Linux. Yeah, that's correct. So our approach is a little bit different. So let me start by saying what's Cloudash. Like, Cloudash is a desktop app for kind of monitoring and troubleshooting serverless architecture services, like serverless stuff in general. So, and the approach that we took is a little bit different because we are not web-based, we're desktop-based. And there's a couple of advantages of that approach. The first one is that, like, you don't need to share your data with us because we're not kind of downloading your metrics and logs to our backend and to process them, etc., etc. We are just using the credentials, the AWS profiles that you have defined on your computer. So nothing goes out of your AWS account. And I think this is, like, considering, like, from the security perspective, this is very crucial. You don't need to, create a role that you give us access to or anything like that. You just use the stuff that you have on your desktop and everything stays on your AWS account. So nothing, we don't download it, we don't process it, we don't do anything from that. And that's a one approach. Well, that's a one advantage. The other advantage is, like, kind of onboarding, as I kind of mentioned, because we're using the AWS profiles that you have defined on your
Well, you're
computer.
doing significantly more than that, because I have a lot of different accounts configured different ways. And when I go to one of them that uses SSO, it automatically fires me off to the SSO login page if I haven't logged in that day for a 12-hour session. For things that have credentials stored locally, it uses those. And for things that are using role chaining to use assuming roles from the things I have credentials for into things that I just do role assumption in, it works flawlessly. It just works the way that most of my command line tools do. I've never seen a desktop app that does this.
Yeah, so we put a lot of effort into making sure that this works great, because we know that, like, no one will use Cloudash if there's, like, not no one, but, like, we're targeting, like, serverless teams maybe in enterprise companies or serverless teams working on some startups. And in most cases, those teams or those engineers, they use SSO or at least MFA, right? So we have it covered. And as you said, like, it should be, the onboarding part is really easy because you just pick your AWS profile, you just pick region and just pick, right now, a CloudFormation stack, because we are based, we get the information about your service based on CloudFormation stack. So we put a lot of effort in making sure that this works without any issues.
There are some challenges to it that I saw while setting it up, and that's also sort of the nature of the fact you are in fact integrating with CloudWatch. For example, it's region specific. Well, what if I want to have an app that's multi-region? Well, you're going to have a bad time, because doing anything multi-region in AWS means you're going to have a bad time. That gets particularly obnoxious and easy to get to when you're doing something like Lambda at Edge, where do the logs live? That's going to be in a CloudFront distribution, whatever region it winds up being accessed from. So it comes down to what distribution endpoint or point of presence did that particular request go through? And it becomes this giant game of whack-a-mole. It's frustrating and it's obnoxious, and it's also in no way your fault.
Yeah, I mean, we are at the beginning. Right now, it's the most straightforward kind of how people think about stacks or serverless. They think in terms of regions, because I think cross regions or replicated stacks or things like that are not really popular yet. Maybe they will become, like, this is how AWS works as a whole. So it's not surprised that we're kind of following this path. But I think my point is that our main goal, the ultimate goal, is to make monitoring, as I said, and troubleshooting serverless app as simple as possible. So once we will hear from our customers, from our users, that, hey, we would like to get a little bit better experience around regions, we will definitely implement that, because why not, right? And I think the whole point of Cloudash, and maybe we can go more deep into that later, is that we want to bring context into your metrics and logs. So, for example, if you're that's the simplest example, the simplest example. If you're seeing for example, X-ray trace ID in your logs, you should be able with one click just see the trace. It's not yet implemented in Cloudash, but we're having it in the backlog. But my point is that like there should be some journey when you're debugging stuff, and you shouldn't be just like let alone having like 20 tabs, CloudWatch tabs open and trying to figure out where I was, like where's the Lambda, where's the API gateway logs, where are the CloudFront logs, and how I can kind of connect all of that, because it's an issue right now. CloudWatch has to be generic. What we want to do with Cloudash is to take those generic tools, because we use, of course, CloudWatch logs, CloudWatch metrics, we fetch data from them, but make the visual part more tailored for specific use case. In our case, it's the serverless use case, and make sure that it's really it shows only the stuff that you need to see, not everything else. So that's that's the main purpose. And one more thing, this is also some kind of measurement of success. We want to reduce number of tabs that you need to have open in your browser when you're dealing with CloudWatch. So we try to put most important stuff in one view, so you don't need to flip between tabs as you usually do and try to understand kind of broader scope or broader context of your error in Lambda.
What inspired you to do this as a desktop application? Because a lot of companies are doing similar things as SaaS, as web apps. And I have to, as someone who you're a self-described serverless engineer, it seems to me that building a web app is sort of like the common description use case of a lot of serverless stuff. And you're sitting here saying, nope, it's desktop app time, which again, I'm super glad you did. It's exactly what I was looking for. How'd you get here?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about both kind of types of apps. So there, definitely web app was the initial idea how to build something. It was the web app, because as you said, that's the default mode. We are thinking that the web app, let's build a web app because I'm an engineer, right? But there is some inspiration coming from Dynabase, which was made by my friend Rafał, who also lives in Poland. I didn't mention that. We're based in Poznań, Poland. And there, when I started thinking about it, there's a lot of benefits of using this approach. The biggest benefit, as I mentioned, is security. And the second benefit is that it's just most cost effective, because we don't need to run any backend, right? We don't need to download all your metrics, all your logs, which I think let's think about it from the perspective. Let's think. So every monitoring company to start working, they have to download all of your stuff from your AWS account. That sounds insane, because you don't need all of that stuff elsewhere, because you
store multiple copies of it. Yeah, I generally, when I'm looking at this, I care about the last 5 to 10 minutes. I don't really care what happened 3.5 years ago on this function. Almost always, but occasionally I want to look back at, this has been breaking. How long has it been that way? But I already have that in the AWS environment, unless I've done the right thing and turned on, log expiry.
Exactly. So this is a lot of I don't want to be mad, mean to anyone, but that's a lot of waste. That's a lot of waste of compute power, because you need to download it, of costs, because you need to get this data out of AWS, which you need to pay for, get metric data and stuff.
And almost all of it's read or write once, write once, read never, because don't generally look at these things. Exactly. And so much of this too, for every invocation I have, even on this low traffic stuff, it's the start with a request ID and what version it's running. It tells me latest. Helpful. A single line of comment in this case says 200. Why it says that, I couldn't tell you. And then it says end request ID. The end. Now, there's no way to turn that off unless you disabled the ability to write to CloudWatch logs in the function, but ingest on that costs 50 cents a gigabyte. So, okay, I guess that's AWS's money-making scam of the year. Good for them. But there's so much of that. It's like looking at, when things are working, it's like looking at a low-traffic site that's behind a load balancer, where there's you have gigabytes in some cases of load balancer log of web server logs on the thing that's sitting in your auto-scaling group. And those logs are just load balancer health checks. 98% of it is just that. Same type of problem here. I I don't care about that. I don't want to pay to store it. I certainly don't want to pay to store it twice. I get it. That makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. So
it also makes your security job a hell of a lot easier because you're not sitting on a whole bunch of confidential data from other people. Because, well, it's just logs. What could possibly be confidential in there? Oh, my sweet summer child. Have you seen some of the crap people put in logs?
I've seen many things in logs. I don't want to mention them. But anyways, and also we are not, like usually when you give access to your AWS account, it can ruin you. Like there might be a lot of, like you need to really trust the company to give access to your AWS account. Of course, in most cases, the roles are scoped to, only CloudWatch stuff, actions, etc., etc. But like there are some situations in which something may not be correctly provisioned, and then you give access to everything. You can get an awful
lot of data you wouldn't necessarily want out of that stuff. Give me just the PDF printout of last month's bill for a lot of environments, and I can tell you disturbing levels of detail about what your architecture is, just because when you can infer an awful lot. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. It makes your security story super straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just repeat my the some inspiration, and when I started thinking about Cloudash, definitely one of the inspiration was Dynabase from for the kind of GUI for like more powerful UI for DynamoDB. So if you're interested in that stuff, you can also check this out.
Oh yeah, I've been a big fan of that too. That'll be a separate discussion on a different episode for sure. But looking at all of this, looking at the approach, the only real concern, well, not even a concern, the only real challenge I have with it for my use case is that when I'm on the road, the only thing that I bring with me for a computer is my iPad Pro. I'm not suggesting by any means that you should build this as an iPad app. That strikes me as like 15 levels of obnoxious. But it does mean that sometimes I still have to go diving into the CloudWatch console when I'm not home, which, without Cloudash, that's what I was doing originally anyway.
You're the only person that requested that. And we will put that into backlog and we'll get to that.
No. The smart question is to offer me a specific enterprise tier pricing that is eye-poppingly high. It's like, hey, if you want to subsidize feature development, we're thrilled to empower that. But
Yeah. Well, I'd like to be honest. That would be hard, right? I like to implement as an iPad app or iPhone app or whatever, because then what's the story behind? How can I get the credentials, right?
You'd have to have some fun with that. There are a couple of ways I can think of offhand, but then that turns into a sandboxing issue, and it becomes something where you have to store credentials locally, regardless, even if they're ephemeral, and that's not great.
Yeah, that's not great, definitely.
But
sorry. I'm really sorry.
As you should be. Maybe turn to a web app someday or something. Who knows? No, but looking at it, one thing what I also appreciate is that we had a conversation when you first launched, and I wound up basically going on a Zoom call with you and more or less tearing apart everything you've built, and in an ideally constructive way. But looking at a lot of the things that you've changed on your website, you listened to an awful lot of feedback. You doubled your pricing, for example. It used to be $10 a month. Now you're $20. Great. I'm a big believer in charging more. You absolutely add that kind of value because it's, $20 a month for a desktop app. That sounds crappy. It's, jackwagon. What's your time worth? I was spending $7 a month in serverless charges and $120 or $130 a month for Epsagon. And I was thrilled to pieces to be doing it because the value I got from being able to quickly diagnose what the hell was going on far outstripped the actual cost of doing these things. Don't fall into the trap of assuming that, I shouldn't pay for software. I can just do it myself. Your time is never free. People think it is, but it's not. I have full faith and confidence in your ability to pull this off. You clearly have done that well based upon what we've seen so far. I just wonder how you're going to wind up tackling that challenge when you get there.
Well, maybe not EC2. Maybe I went too far.
Honestly, even EC2 land, it feels like that is more or less a solved problem. If you want to treat it just as EC2, you can use Nagios. It's fine. There are tools that have solved that problem, but not much that I've seen has solved the serverless piece the way that I want it solved. You have.
So it's definitely a long road to make sure that the serverless, and by serverless, I mean serverless, how AWS understands serverless, so including Fargate, for example. So there's a lot of stuff that we can improve. It's a lot of stuff that we can make easier with Cloudash than is with CloudWatch. just staying inside serverless, and it will take us a lot of time to make sure that it's all correct and correctly modeled, correctly designed, and etc. So yeah, I went too far with EC2. Sorry.
Exactly.
Sorry,
that's okay. We
using
all go too
EC2
far
instances.
with EC2, I assure you. If people want to kick the tires on it, where can they find it?
They can find it on cloudash.dev.
Yeah. 1D in the middle. That one throws me
1D.
sometimes.
Actually, after talking to you, we have a double D domain as well, so we can also try Cloudash with double D.
Okay, that is fantastic. Because I keep trying to put the double D in when I'm typing it in my search tool on my desktop, and it doesn't show up, and it's like, what the? Oh, right. But yeah, we'll get there one of these days. If people
only the domain. It's only the domain. You will be
exactly.
redirected
we'll have to expand later.
D.
I'll finance the feature request there. It'll go well. If people want to learn more about what you have to think about these things, where else can they find you?
On Twitter, and my Twitter handle is mdenw, mdenw, which is NTH in mdenw, and my co-founder T. Lacome. You can probably add that to show notes.
Oh, I certainly will. It's fine. Yeah, here's a whole bunch of letters. I hear you. My Twitter handle used to be my amateur radio call sign. It turns out most people don't think like that. And yeah, it's become an iterative learning process. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and for building this thing. I really appreciate both of them.
Again, thank you for having me here. I encourage everyone to visit cloudash.dev. If you have any feature requests, any question, just send us an email on hello@cloudash.dev, or just go to GitHub repository and issues, just create an issue, describe what you want, and we can talk about it. We're always happy to help. The main purpose, the ultimate goal of Cloudash is to make the serverless engineers' life easier, on very high level, and a little bit lower level, just to make troubleshooting and debugging serverless apps easier.
Well, from my perspective, you've succeeded. Maciej Winnicki, founder of Cloudash. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn, and this is Screaming in the Cloud. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Whereas if you've hated this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, along with an angry comment telling me exactly why I'm wrong for using an iPad to do these things, but not being able to send it because you didn't find a good way to store the credentials.